You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and it is time once again to recap and rank the teams remaining in the NFL in my power rankings. So I invite you all, comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts on this past weekend's games. What were your takeaways? What are your power rankings? What are your thoughts on my power rankings? And if you're interested on my thoughts from teams 9 through 32, as you already see them on the board here, I went into great detail the last couple of weeks breaking down why I have everyone where they are, but I'm not going to recap a bunch of teams that haven't played in the last week or so. So make sure you jump into those if you're curious, if this is the first time you're here. But if you're not, let's dive in. We'll go one team at a time since we're only working with 8 teams right now. So we'll start with the team at number 8, falling a couple of spots here, the Houston Texans, who kind of took a crash and burn back down to reality, going up against the number 1 seed in the AFC and the Baltimore Ravens, losing 34-10. It was an ugly performance offensively, and I think they kind of suffered from losses like losing Tank Dell a couple of months ago, or a month and a half ago, however long ago that was. On top of that, just going up against what is an unbelievable defense in Baltimore, even missing a starter in Marlon Humphrey. They're a team that will not make it easy for you to throw the football. They will not make it easy for you to run the football, and a real lack of a true running game from Houston. That's kind of been a weakness for them for a large majority of the season, kind of reared its ugly head in this matchup here as well. I just think it ultimately kind of boiled down to there was a bit of a talent imbalance going up in this matchup here, and that's not to say that there isn't talent in Houston, but the Ravens are absolutely littered with talent and are among the most talented teams in the NFL right now, whereas the Texans, a team that I don't think anyone even in this had the slightest inkling of any sort of idea that we were going to be talking the Houston Texans fighting for a shot in the AFC Championship come playoff time this year, just ultimately found themselves a little bit over their heads in this matchup. But I will say I've got to give a ton of credit to the Houston Texans, man, because this was just an unbelievable Cinderella run that, you know, it maybe gets a little bit overshadowed because of what the Detroit Lions are doing right now, but I don't really think you can understate what Houston and DeMeco Ryans was able to do over there with CJ Stroud coming in as a rookie quarterback, all the conversation around his smarts and whatnot coming out of the draft last year. For them to have ended up where they were this season, I got to tip my cap to them. Unbelievable showing, and as somebody that grew up rooting against them as a Colts fan, I'm envious to see something like this, because watching CJ Stroud step in and lead his team all the way through to a playoff berth, winning in the wild card round his first year as well, it kind of reminds me of those early days of Andrew Luck. So really excited to see where the Houston Texans go, because I think the sky is the limit for them. They have so much young, unappreciated talent that is on that roster, and it really is nowhere to go but up from that for them. Moving in at the number 7 spot, we have ourselves the Tampa Bay Buccaneers jumping up one here, who, again, a team I've got to give some credit to, even despite their loss, where the score might have made the game look a little bit closer than the reality of the way the matchup was looking in the final minutes of that game when they were down 2 scores. I do have to give this team some credit as well. A team that was 9-8, who had to kind of go cheap in free agency and find themselves a quarterback because they were working off the heels of losing Tom Brady, to go bring in Baker Mayfield and basically have him revive his career there in Tampa Bay, to put you in a situation now where you may have your long-term answer at quarterback, at least for the foreseeable future now, for the next 2, 3, 4 years. It's a pretty exciting time to be in Tampa Bay. There are some questions regarding what's going to happen with some of the veterans that are on that team, both offensively and defensively, and I do think they do need some work on the defensive side of the ball, more specifically when it comes to dropping back into coverage. There's definitely got to be some reworking there, whether it's schematic or personnel-wise. There's definitely some changes that have to be made because they really struggled defending the pass, and you kind of saw that going up against a high-powered Lions offense that loves to throw the football. But overall, another team that I don't think a lot of people really expected to be making this type of noise in the playoffs. Obviously, somebody had to win the NFC South. Would I have picked the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming into this season? Probably not. I think I was somewhere along the lines of like Saints or maybe Falcons. I don't remember exactly where I stood going into the season, but I definitely don't think I had Tampa Bay sitting as the winner of the South and finding themselves in the divisional round of the playoffs. So tip my cap to them, but ultimately a tough performance where you're going up against an offense in Detroit that is just so high-powered, so able to move the football, and you basically have to try to keep up with them in some situations, depending on how a defense is able to handle what Detroit does. And clearly, a little bit of an issue for the Buccaneers, and just if you can't keep up with what Detroit's doing, you're going to find yourself on the losing end of a game like that. So tough loss, but again, tip my cap, credit where credit is due, not where anyone really anticipated Tampa Bay being, and the future kind of looks bright, and I don't really think I could have said that coming into this season. Moving into the number 6 spot here, dropping a couple after a really tough loss, we have ourselves the Buffalo Bills. Number 2 seed with the world in Buffalo behind them. It really felt like this was the opportunity. This could be the Bills' year. They corrected the offensive woes that they were dealing with mid-season by letting go of Ken Dorsey and promoting Joe Brady, and now we are back to where they have been for the last handful of years now, and that's getting knocked out somewhere between the divisional and the championship rounds of the playoffs, unable to beat Patrick Mahomes or the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow when it matters most. And you're just kind of left wondering, where do we go from here? Offensively, it was not a pretty game. There were some miscues, and I know a lot of people are going to look at, Bass and say, oh, he missed that field goal. Like, yes, he missed the field goal, but that game was lost even prior to that in a handful of situations. I mean, even in just a few plays prior, Josh Allen has a receiver wide open in the end zone, and yeah, I know the offensive lineman maybe bumped into him, but realistically, I don't think that throw even hits the receiver, whether Josh Allen gets bumped there or not, because that throw was significantly short, and he wasn't really hit that hard in the scope of football things when making that throw. So I just don't really know how much that actually affects that pass. There's some miscues here and there. I think some people need to take a look at what happened with Stephon Diggs and maybe the lack of production that he saw in that game there as well, whether it was just a hard time getting him the football or not trying to get him the football enough. I'm curious how you let your wide receiver walk away in a game like that with 3 catches for 21 yards. There's a lot of things that you can look at. And even in a game where defensively, you're really hurt, you're down and out, and you have been all season, but you've still been a great defense. You hung on strong, but ultimately it kind of ended up being an offensive loss. Like, that's kind of how I look at it. The miscues on offense really hurt this team. And you didn't even really have the back-breaking turnovers that you've succumbed to over the last few years. It was a really relatively clean game, but it was an inefficient game offensively. And now again, you're just kind of left wondering, where do we go from here? What does the future for Buffalo lie? How does Buffalo get over the hump? Is it Bill Belichick? I don't know, but at this point, I don't know. I thought that this was probably the most balanced offense we had seen from Buffalo since Josh Allen got there. They had the running game and the passing game to go with it. And once again, just coming up short, and it's unfortunately to the Chiefs once more, and this time it happened at home. And this is, this was the game that everyone in Buffalo wanted. They wanted it in Buffalo with fans there, with the, a trip to the AFC Championship on the line. And then you're sitting on the outside looking in again. I don't really know what to make of it. I still consider them one of the best teams in the NFL, but something has got to be figured out in how this team is going to get themselves over the hump, because you can't keep losing to the same teams every single year in the playoffs and not have some sort of change happen. Moving into number 5, we've got ourselves the Green Bay Packers. And I've got to say, this one was, I was kind of scratching my head as I was sorting these teams out here in this top 8, but I don't really know how I can't have the Green Bay Packers here. Defensively, the last 3 or 4 weeks, they really pulled it together after what was a really ugly stretch where and listen, for a while, I felt like I was spouting off about a good Packers defense that just kind of disappeared, and Packers fans went to calling for, having your defensive coordinator fired, to the last 4 weeks, or last 4 games, I should say, that they played, pulled it together, tightened up, looked really solid. You shut down a pretty solid offense last week, and then you shut things down again this week against the San Francisco 49ers, and you're a couple of interceptions away from potentially having yourself a berth into the NFC Championship with the youngest playoff roster in what feels like the history of the NFL because of how young everybody is, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But credit where credit is due. Talk about playing with house money and doubling down on that, going all in. I mean, it was a fun sight to watch, and I'll even admit this. I had to work early Sunday morning, so I turned off the game somewhere around, I don't know, the third quarter, where there was a 3-and-out or something like that from San Francisco, and I really thought San Francisco was going to lose the game. Ultimately, go to bed, wake up in the morning to finish up the game, and I was very surprised at the way the rest of that game turned around, because I really thought that the Packers had the 49ers beat, but it really came down to execution late, trusting in some of the amazing skill talent San Francisco has, and it took a Herculean type of effort, both offensively and defensively, to thwart a Packers team that was not playing like a number 7 seed. I'll tell you that. Absolutely was not playing like a number 7 seed. So hats off to the Green Bay Packers. What an effort. It's unfortunate a couple of bad picks ultimately put you in the spot that you were. And that missed field goal late as well, really tough because that could have put you in a situation where you're in a tie game rather than being down by 3. So a couple of just unfortunate miscues late in the game where you maybe walk away feeling like Green Bay lost the game more so than ultimately the 49ers won that game. But that's a conversation for another day. Coming in at number 4, we have ourselves the Kansas City Chiefs moving up a spot here, beating the Buffalo Bills. Listen, the cards were stacked against them. A lot of people doubted Kansas City and their ability to get the job done here, especially being in Buffalo. I was one of those people. I just was not sure with the issues that we've seen from Kansas City over basically the entirety of the season. It feels like if they could really string 4 good quarters together and be able to take down the Buffalo Bills. Even after the way we saw these two teams match up earlier in the season, I just wasn't sure that they were going to have it in the tank. And I felt like the miscues were ultimately going to get them. And when we saw that fumble go into the end zone, I really thought that was the turning point right there. I saw that and I was like, oh my God, like this is going to be how it goes for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's another miscue late in the game that's going to cost you the outcome, and it's going to be like a super unfortunate series of events here. But ultimately, defense holds strong, puts Buffalo in a situation to have to settle for a field goal. Josh Allen misses a wide open receiver in the end zone late in the game as well. And luck is on your side for once. In a season where it felt like luck was absolutely with just the ball bouncing the other way all season long, tipped pass into interception after tipped pass after fumble after drop pass, you name it, it feels like the Chiefs have dealt with it this year. And finally, the luck of the football gods bounces your way. Ball goes wide right. You're walking away with a berth to the AFC Championship game, and you're going up against a Baltimore Ravens team in what is another awesome AFC rivalry I cannot wait to see. Can the Chiefs stack up to what Baltimore's doing as they just continue to kind of rout teams? I don't know. We'll look into that this week. We'll have predictions later on in the week as well. But I am very much looking forward to seeing how Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs put together a 4 quarters against what has been a vaunted Baltimore unit. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have some movement. The San Francisco 49ers. Listen, San Francisco got the job done. But like I said when I was discussing earlier, I didn't finish watching that game live. I had to turn it off. I had to get up early. I was like, I'll finish watching this game later on tomorrow. And I was very surprised to wake up and see that game finish with a San Francisco 49ers victory. I've got to be honest with you all. There was definitely some issues that I pulled out from this game, and I'm a little bit worried about San Francisco going into this matchup now against Detroit. First thing, whether it was just the rain, I don't know. Maybe it was just the rain. It really felt like Purdy was a little bit off. Not his usual self. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh no, I'm worried it's going to carry over next week, but it is a takeaway worth at least looking at. The second thing that I'm really concerned about is just the lack of pressure for a team that has so much money and so many picks invested in their pass rush and just on the defensive line as a whole. When you look at the guys, it's like a murderer's row of Chase Young, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa. You would think that that's the team leading the NFL in pressure rate, leading the league in sacks, leading the league in defensive stops, preventing anyone from, it should be a top 5 unit against the run, which I'm pretty sure that they are somewhere in that ballpark. But you expect them to be far more dominant than they actually were, yet that Green Bay Packers offensive line was giving them fits all game long. It really felt like you were really lucky to create some of the pressure and create some of the issues and ultimately some of the mistakes that Green Bay dealt with late in that game that basically cost them the matchup. But I am a little bit concerned. I feel like the defense in San Francisco maybe not quite as great as I feel like a lot of us have looked at in the last few weeks. Overall, the team is ridiculously talented. I still consider them the 3rd best team in the NFL, and 3 out of 32 is definitely not a bad place to be. But I do have some concerns coming out of that game, going up against a red-hot Detroit Lions team right now. So I like San Francisco. I've been picking San Francisco quite a bit this year. I'm not sitting here trying to sound like I'm trashing on San Francisco, but 49ers fans, I will say that you should definitely be coming out of that game a little bit concerned with some of the things you saw. Still one of the best teams in the NFL, but that's not to sit here and act like we can't look at what this team did in that game and think, okay, yes, they overcame some big odds. Happy to see all that. Defense came up big when it mattered most late. Dre Greenlaw, big couple of interceptions, obviously swung that game right in their favor. But there were still situations within all that you were still letting the Green Bay Packers come back in and nearly steal the game from you anyways. So slight concerns. I still think they're one of the best, but that is definitely something that I took away from that matchup there. At number 2, Detroit Lions. What can I say? Like I said, the score made that game look a little bit closer than it actually was. When Tampa Bay was down about 2 possessions, I didn't really give them too much of a shot at that point. Once we got to that situation there when the Lions hit 31, I felt like, all right, this is kind of ball game. We were just not seeing consistent enough offense from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for me at that point to really personally believe that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to make a comeback. Even after they scored that touchdown, you go for that 2, you failed the 2-point conversion, and I'm literally just like face palming, like, what are we doing here? Like, just get the touchdown, take the 7 points, and get the hell out of there and get ready for the next drive, and hopefully you can score, and then worry about going for 2 if you want to try to make some cheeky play, but you got to make a stop against Detroit anyways. And ultimately, what happens? An interception late in the game cost you the game. Big ups by the Detroit Lions defense, able to generate a lot of pressure in that game as well. Like I said, I think the Detroit Lions are a very hot team right now and a very tough team to beat. I think that they're matching up really well, all things considered, where the current state of both them and the San Francisco 49ers are right now. So I think we're heading in for one hell of a clash next week in the NFC Championship. One that I think is going to end up being a lot closer than maybe some people were initially anticipating. I know that betting odds right now, as I've seen, San Francisco is still a heavy favorite to win the Super Bowl. And I think that might see some correction just going through this week as people take some time to look back on these 2 games here, because it's definitely a lot closer with San Francisco and Detroit than I think a lot of people thought, maybe just even a week or 2 ago, as the 2 like heavy favorites coming into the playoffs. And then, of course, at number 1, we have ourselves the Baltimore Ravens, who have claimed the number 1 throne spot for like what feels like a month and a half at this point now. They've been there since after Christmas. So however long that is now, what are we looking at? Nearly a month at this point. All I've got to say is that no matter who the competition seems to be, Baltimore comes in and is just slaughtering opponents. And even the teams that are playoff teams or winning record teams, they're winning by 2 possessions or more, again, slaughtering their opponents. I don't know if Baltimore is just leaps and bounds that much better than everybody else this year, and if this is just their year and they're going to race their way to a Super Bowl championship. It's definitely possible. But I just have a really hard time buying right now that anyone can beat Baltimore. If anyone's going to be able to do it, it's going to be Patrick Mahomes. It seems like he's the Grim Reaper. I remember him getting dubbed that nickname a few years back, and just when you think it might be your time, Patrick Mahomes comes knocking on the door because he's usually waiting for you somewhere around the AFC Championship picture come playoff time. I am very excited for this game next week because the Chiefs will be a test for the Baltimore Ravens. Yes, this team is really good. They're a phenomenal unit, top to bottom, both offensively and defensively. I really think that, yes, a slow start because you're coming off of a bye week. That was not really too surprising to me. I think we saw that from both San Francisco and Baltimore in this playoff series here in the divisional round. A lot of slow start coming from both the 2 teams that got the bye, but once they picked it up in the second half and they adjusted, I mean, you can forget about it. It was a completely different ball game. Like, it was like night and day, 2 different teams. And now that, you've kind of, got your swagger back a little bit, you've played your 4 quarters of football again for the first time in a couple of weeks. Now you're going into a matchup against what is another kind of arch rivalry type of matchup here. I feel like that's one of those things that has flown under the radar. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, that's going to create some fireworks. And for all the hype that this Bills-Chiefs game had coming into this one, expect the Ravens and Chiefs to get that much attention and even more, because this is going to be a very good one. It's going to take all the Taylor Swift fans and Chiefs Kingdom to take down Baltimore next week in Baltimore at that. But those are my power rankings, my thoughts, my opinions on this past weekend's games. Let me hear yours in the comment section down below. But as always, I greatly appreciate you if you made it to the end. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.